In 2004, the European Union got 10 new members, referred to somewhat mistakenly as New Europe. But these were old European states. The membership is expanding continuously. We can take a moment now to get into our time machines and travel back to 2004. But what was the climate like in Europe at that time? So join me, Jan Darasz, for How We Got Here.
After overthrowing the communist regime, Warsaw began negotiations with EU members, signing trade and cooperation agreements with other European countries. This resulted in Poland officially applying for EU membership in April 1994 and securing a confirmation of the application in December of the same year. By the turn of the century, Poland managed to find success in majority of negotiation areas. This culminated in the signing of the Treaty of Accession by the Council of the European Union in April 2003. The final adoption of the treaty in Poland took place in the form of a nationwide referendum, with almost 80% of participants voting in favor of joining the bloc.
That's a historic day for Poland, and I hope the result will be very historic for Poland too.
Then finally, after years of negotiations, Poland was admitted into the bloc. May 1st, 2004 saw 10 countries, including Poland, join the EU.
The most important event that day was the ceremony in Dublin. It took place in Dublin because back then Ireland was holding the presidency. The flag-raising ceremony for the 10 candidate states was hosted by Ireland. It was a beautiful afternoon cast in the light of a gently setting sun. I stood there alongside all of the EU's leaders and watched as the Polish flag was unfurled along with those of the other candidate states.
After years of communist isolation, trade flourished and Poles fully joined the European community. A day-long celebration was held in Słubice, culminating in a historic meeting of residents and politicians on a bridge. The 2004 enlargement was the largest in the history of the community. Apart from Poland, the EU was joined at the same time by Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Slovenia, Cyprus and Malta. Now, 20 years later, Poles still enjoy the freedom and prosperity that comes with being a member of the European Union.
My guest today is Witold Rodkiewicz. He's a senior fellow at the Centre for Eastern Studies here in Warsaw. So welcome again to the programme.
Thank you for the invitation. It's always a pleasure.
Pleasure for us. Can we go back to your upbringing and education in Poland, socialist Poland, communist Poland? What can you give us a description of what the state of Poland was, 90s, late 80s, the transformation, that kind of decade?
Okay, I didn't live through the transformation itself because I was abroad at the time. Mm-hmm. I left Poland in 1986, but I can remember the mood, the atmosphere. Before that, 1970s, 1980s, the Solidarity time, which was an explosion of great hope, and which really made a person like me political. But the key thing is that before the fall of communism, for my generation, people growing up in the 70s, I had my Abitur in 1980. It seemed the socialist project, socialist Poland, seemed a hopeless enterprise. We saw, at least those of us who could think, we were completely aware of the fact that economically this was a disaster and we have no future. In very simple material terms, where were you going to live? Where what kind of a job you were going to have? Plus this stifling, really suffocating atmosphere of socialist control, of the repression, not necessarily in physical terms, but the physical repression was always there. You were made aware of it you were warned all the time. The generation of my parents who went through Stalinization, through the Second World War, and what happened after the war. So you knew that if you made a wrong move, that might have very bad consequences for your career, for your living conditions, and so on. So you were always careful what you say, even in Poland. Although Poland, as I know, I had a opportunity to compare it with so-called Deutsche Demokratische Republik, East Germany. We were still the paradise of freedom. Because when I talked with my East German colleagues, what they were describing was completely, even for us, it was terrible.
So when Poland and other Eastern European countries came to the end of the 20th century, negotiations to come into NATO, negotiations to the EU, was this a great hope? So that'll be my first question for you. And secondly, what did the Soviet Union think of all this movement at the time itself, end of the 20th century, beginning of the 21st?
You mean Russia?
Yes. Sorry, yes.
Yes.
Of course, yeah.
My personal feeling and assessment were more connected with the end of communism and the explosion of free enterprise and democracy, freedom in Poland. I think that was something that was really the other things that you mentioned, NATO and EU. At least to me, they were a way to make those conquests, because to a large extent this was because of the Polish society. Polish society really, one might say, earned it, and sort of managed to accomplish this. I mean, we built a messy but real democratic system, the working economy. This is not a given. I'm because of my interests, I've watched other countries trying to go through this, and our experience was very good, and our performance was, I wouldn't hesitate to say the word stellar. I was looking at EU and NATO as institutional ways to make our success more secure, because I was aware of the various possibilities in terms of international environment, in terms of longer term history as a historian. Things might change, Russia might recover, the imperial impulse might reappear. We should be anchored in institutions, in Western institutions. We should be able we should be part of an alliance, of a military alliance. That was the key thing. And of course, as far as the European Union, there was really no other game in Europe at the time.
Yes. The transition between the 20th and 21st centuries, was that a time when Russia was uncharacteristically, former Soviet Union, or was it uncharacteristically weak?
Yes, this was among the weakness. And there was a moment in Russian history at the time, first years of 1990s, and this is the forces that really destroyed the Soviet Union, the Russian democratic movement. There was such a thing, and it was an authentic movement. And they dominated for a while. For a very brief moment, they dominated the public space, and they were able to impose an agenda. And they had a real anti-imperial agenda. They wanted to shed Russian imperial agenda. They wanted Russia to become a normal country. But by that meant a country like West Europe, like the US. But very quickly they lost their attractiveness to the public and to the elites, and already by mid-1990s it was clear that the only thing that prevents Russia, to me, the only thing that prevents Russia from engaging in kind of reconquista and revisionism was that the Russian elite was weak, that Russia was weak.
Moving over to the other side of Europe, the Western Europe, the Benelux countries, France, Germany, what was their attitude? Is it possible to gauge their attitude to this expansion of 10 new members into the European Union? Traditionally, that area, Eastern Europe, is a bargaining tool between Russia and the Western powers. Was it a warm reception to adopt these members, to admit these members? Was it a cool reception? How do you judge?
No, it was a warm reception. There's no question about this. But there were elements, I think, in these receptions or the assumptions that created problems which we are facing now, and which I also had an opportunity to observe as somebody who is trying to watch Germany's Ostpolitik, and who interacted with German experts and German officials. There's a French journalist, very prominent French journalist, Sylvie Kaufmann, who's just published a book, Les Aveugles, about the blind ones, the blinded, about how it's about EU policies towards Russia in the last 30 years. And what is interesting is that she's an insider. She has excellent connections. Politicians talk to her. And what is interesting, it's because this is not the main theme of the book, but it comes out in the process, which is more precious for me as a historian, thinking about this as a source. That in that joy that, I'm generalizing, of course, the Western Europe, Germany, France, especially Germany and France, they also thought that this would mean that that we are kind of children that have to be brought up, that have to be set in their ways,
yes,
have
President
to be reformed.
Chirac's
Yes,
statement.
and so Kaufmann has talked to German officials who were present at the same conference, and a German official said, we would like to say the same thing. He's absolutely right, but we would never say it aloud. So there's this paternalistic attitude and feeling of superiority. And some of the things that I've witnessed I wouldn't have believed, which were the consequence of that. If somebody told me, I wouldn't have believed that. And going back to, and this was also certain political consequences for the Union, because the Union is now a very different animal than it was when we were joining it. And I think the key issue was, to me, a symbolic issue, was the Nice Treaty, when the voting system was changed. The voting system was changed especially because, and it was changed for the reason, and nobody even hid it. The reason was to change the voting power of the newly arrived countries, because when they were accepted, and the voting reason was designed very carefully in the 50s originally, with many, it was a very good voting system which was supposed to limit the ability of the largest countries to impose their views on the smaller countries and medium countries. And that system was completely, its philosophy was changed. And I think this is part of the problem. So, because going back to the book by Kaufmann, she shows how completely Germany and France dominated EU policy towards Russia. They basically set the policy, and they didn't listen to anyone. And this is,
Munich
people say now, Germans say, oh, you were right. But they still don't listen to us.
Yes, and so final question, is that going to be the primary source of tension between old Europe, France and Germany, and old Europe, Eastern Europe, as Poland, the Baltics?
I think yes, this was always one of the problems, and the major problem. Second problem, which is connected with that, was this. It's now weaker, but there was this idea of EU becoming a geopolitical power, sort of independent of the US, the French ideas, the Gaullist ideas, which for me, I think it's not a coincidence that a lot of people who are very different political opinions in Central and Eastern Europe look at this with concern.
Yeah.
At least.
Right, we have to draw our discussion to a close, so 2 cheers for the EU. But thank you very much, Witold Dorotkevich, for coming on to the programme.
Thank you.
So that's all we have time for, but join us again for How We Got Here.